So we'll start. As I'm sure everybody is aware, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday's Shavuos, and we'll learn some inyonim about Shavuos, some Chassidus about Shavuos. And before we start, let's just revise some common ground with everybody. I'm sure this is news to nobody, but we have what's called the Shalosh Regalim. We have three festivals: Pesach, Shavuos, and the month of Tishrei, with Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Aseres Yom Tshuva, Sukkot, Shimini Atzeres, Simchas Torah. But there are three groups. Those three groups of festivals. Of the three, Shavuos is the curious one in the sense that it's the one that has the least, it captures people's imagination the least. People who are not religious and keep very little run to go to a Seder for Pesach. Everybody tries to stay in a sukkah and have a l'chaim in the sukkah in Tishrei. People go to shul. Unbelievably, the number of people who fast on Yom Kippur, who keep nothing else, and you see them walking in their sneakers on Yom Kippur. But Shavuos is a lot of people don't put any accent on Shavuos. And curiously, it's a curious thing because if you want to know where, Am Yisrael Chai, we've outlived every host nation, and if people used to ask the Rebbe what was the secret of Jewish survival, and the Rebbe used to say there's no secret. We just as Jews keep the Torah keeps Jews, and our connection to Torah is really the reason that we have our continued miraculous existence. So you would think that when Shavuos comes, which is the Yontif, which celebrates the giving of the Torah to Am Yisrael, you'd think that would be the one that gets the main focus from the average rank and file Jew, and that isn't the case. So it's there's a very interesting reason why it isn't the case, but in order to get to that reason, we need some background. So l'chaim. There's a piece of Talmud that says that Reb Yossi didn't used to drink. It was very bad for his health. But on Shavuos he drank a lot and was sick for months because of it. So they asked him why he drank on Shavuos, and he answered that Shavuos was such an important festival that if he didn't keep Shavuos the way he did, he'd be just like every other Yossi in the marketplace. So the commentators all struggle with this, and first of all, what's wrong with being just another Yossi in the marketplace, and what does it mean just being another Yossi in the marketplace? But the bottom line of what he was talking about, and without going into the whole lomdus of this, he was saying that the world runs, Hashem recreates the world every moment, as we know, the world runs, and nature is this amazing puzzle of genius involved with interacting with genius. But at the end of the day, humanity spends its 60, 70, 90, 100 years, whatever it is, with its nefesh in its guf, in a purposeless, blind, daily putting one foot in front of the other, without any real notion of why we're here, what they're supposed to achieve, and but Rabbi Yossi is saying that once Shavuos took place, once we had the revelation of godliness on Har Sinai, and once we were given the Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu, and once our mission was clarified at Matan Torah, as we'll see in a minute, all of a sudden a Jew's life becomes a purposeful existence. And as a purposeful existence, it's a different kind of life. So what he was saying was, he didn't want to be just another creature on the planet, genius that it is, the way of life, and genius that how everything interacts and all the rest of it, but to be a Jew who is conscious of his mission in life gives you a whole different life altogether, because it's a life governed by a sense of purpose. And if you have a sense of purpose, then you have a sense of success and a sense of failure and a sense of how to rectify the failure and how to make the most out of the success. So the point that the Rebbe makes in this Sikha is that although it gets the least attention of the three regalim, really Shavuos is arguably the most important, because it gives us our raison d'etre. It gives us the whole reason that we are Jews rather than human beings. Nothing wrong with being human beings. Human beings, genius should be genius, but the role of a Jew is different, and without understanding Shavuos, it's very difficult to understand what the purpose of a Jew is, and what does it mean that we're the chosen people? What does it mean that we're an Am Segula? That's probably one of the most misunderstood terms and misunderstood positions that Jews take, and it's been the cause of a great deal of tension between Jews and non-Jews, mainly because the non-Jews don't understand what we mean by it, and I have to tell you, most Jews don't understand what we mean by it. They think that we're superior in some way, or they want to rest on the myth that we are cleverer, or we're better at money, or we're goodness knows what they imagine that those myths are. And they are myths, and you should know that that's not the way we learn, especially in Chabad. We learn that all men, women and children, all human beings are God's creations, and they're all precious to Hashem. And so what does it mean that we're chosen? And to explain that just before we start, a choice is a very misunderstood word. A choice doesn't mean an obvious preference. If you put $1 million in one corner of the room and $1 in the other corner of the room and say, choose which you'll take, that's not a choice. That's a logical preference that everybody is going to prefer the $1 million to the dollar. When we talk about choice in terms of Behira, in terms of real choice, we're talking about choice between two equal things. So if you say that we are, if the Am Yisrael is an Am Segula, or that we are the chosen people, it can't be that we're superior, because if we were superior, that wouldn't be a choice. This is a very deep and difficult thing for many people to get their heads around, because people have grown up with this as a myth from the day they're born. It's an anti-Semitic myth. It's a Jewish myth. It's a myth. If we were superior to non-Jews, intrinsically superior, then there's no choice. What did Hashem choose? The very fact that we say that we are chosen means that we were chosen from as one of equals. So what's the difference? The difference is in our responsibility. What is our responsibility? That's what Shavuos is about. What Shavuos is about is understanding what is the difference between Jews and non-Jews, eradicating this nonsensical notion of superiority, and understanding that we have a different purpose in life. And that purpose in life is not better or worse, it's different. And if you don't understand that purpose, then as a Jew, your life is impoverished because you're not meeting up with what it is that you're designed to be doing. On the other hand, if you are aware of that, there's no question. You can ask anybody who learns Chassidus, any amount of Chassidus, everybody in this room, everybody who's listening on the tape, anybody that's learned Chabad Chassidus feels different. I don't care what, and if they tell you they don't, they're lying. You feel different. You have a different level of appreciation of various things. To what extent depends to what extent you learn. Depends to what extent the Chassidus that you learn penetrates you as das. But it's no contest to say that somebody who learns Chassidus doesn't have his horizons broadened, doesn't begin to see in a different way, see in color as opposed to black and white, and but what comes with that is a different level of responsibility. And that different level of responsibility becomes one's understanding that the Torah is our blueprint for life. It is our roadmap for life. And the more a person can get in tune with the Torah and Hashem's mitzvahs, and the more one can be part of that paradigm, the better his life becomes, and which, by the way, is not why you do it. You don't learn Chassidus to be happier. You don't serve Hashem to have a better life. We serve Hashem because that's our job. That's the job for which we're employed. And if you're employed on a job, then you're given the tools to be able to do that job. If I need to do legal work, I'm not going to brief a barrister in one. We have a mortgage fund. If I'm going to have a mortgage dispute, I'm not going to brief a barrister who knows about negligence and running down cases. I want to brief a barrister who has the tools to deal with my problem, which is a mortgage problem. So he needs to be able to function in that area. He needs to have the tools. So when Hashem gives us a job, he also gives us the tools with which to work that job, and if we don't use those tools to work that job, there is a corresponding lack of fulfilling of one's potential. So I'm going to try and explain. I'm going to try and explain. There are no coincidences, especially in Torah. And when we learn Torah, if you see something that is a pattern, that pattern is of course purposeful because it's God's wisdom. And so we learn from the Alter Rebbe and then down through the various Rebbeim, and this was articulated very clearly by our Rebbe, that the holiday of Shavuos, the Yontif of Shavuos, and what we are celebrating revolves around the number 3. It's the deep secret of Torah. It's the deep secret of a Jew's life. This number 3, and we're going to go through it. So the number 3, everybody, we've talked about this many years, and everybody's learned this, I'm sure. But just to revise it so we're on the same page, it says that Shavuos is the Torah, which is made up of 3 parts, which is Torah, Nevi'im, Kesuvim, and it's given to a people of 3 parts, which is Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, and it's given in the 3rd month, which is, we have Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan, and it's given in the month of Sivan. And, you know, if you learn without any depth in Hasidus, you think, oh, that's an interesting coincidence. It's very interesting, 3, 3, 3. But it's not a coincidence, and it's not just interesting, it's fundamental to you and my happiness in life to understand this. Because what is going on here, and this is the paradigm that I'm going to try and get everybody to understand, is that one and one is enough. One is alone, loneliness. It's nothing. There's no companionship. There's nothing with it. 2 is the potential for an argument. But 3 is the potential for shalom. And you need to understand that this is at the core of a Jew's life. Because, and this dynamic is extrapolated through everything that we do. So, for example, you have Hesed and you have Gevurah. But Hesed and Gevurah, kindness and strictness, are mutually exclusive. Pure Hesed is completely exclusive of pure Gevurah, and vice versa. But on their own, they're not positive forces on their own. They're only positive forces if they're harnessed with one another into a shalom. So, for example, you have, there are times, let's go through a parent-child dynamic. There are times when it's very important to cuddle your child, and very important to kiss your child, and very important to buy your child presents if you can afford it, and very important to stroke your child's ego and make sure that he grows up to have strong self-confidence. And there are times when, if you're a proper parent, you're going to have to punish the child. If he goes wrong and he's naughty, he does the wrong thing, you have to bring Gevurah to bear. But the child can't ever feel that there's only Hesed or only Gevurah, otherwise you're going to bring up a psychopath. There has to be a mixture of both of them, such that the cohesive whole is so it's explained that you have Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. What's Tiferes? Tiferes is the shalom making of the 3, and that comes. The word is in Hebrew is rachamim. Rachamim connotes mercy. But mercy, it's very hard to get this word right, because what it means, let me explain what it means. It means that somebody needs kindness, or somebody needs strictness. Or let's do this. Let's suppose, for example, that somebody comes to you for money. He needs money, and he's your enemy. He's bad-mouthed you. He's cheated you in business. He's done things to you in the past so your nature, the natural reaction is to say no to him, right? Rachamim means he doesn't deserve it. I don't have to give it to him, but I'm giving it to him out of mercy.
Compassion.
Compassion. I'm giving it to him out of compassion. Not that he deserves it. The Hesed guy is giving it because he thinks that if the poor man is a beggar, he deserves to be helped. The guy who's Gevuradik doesn't want to give it to him because he doesn't deserve it, doesn't need to be helped. But compassion, the third level, which is the shalom making level, is he's going to give him the money out of, not because he deserves it, not because he wants to give it out of kindness, but because he just does it out of compassion, out of mercy. So I'm trying to get you to see that there is an ongoing dynamic all the time. I'll give you another simple example. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'aretz. In the beginning, Hashem created the heavens and the earth. He made the first day was Sunday. Second day was Monday. First day we learn is Chesed. Second day we learn is Gevurah. Third day it says that Hashem saw what he did and saw that it was good, and good is mentioned twice. Why is good mentioned twice? Because it's the introduction of the rationalization between polar opposites. What Shavuos is an empowerment for a Jew to be able to live his life with those polar opposites, but making peace between those two polar opposites. And the more he's skilled in doing that, in all the levushim, in all the garments for his neshama, thought, speech, and action, the better his life's going to be. And that's why it says, one of the big warnings in the Gemara, you should know this, it says that you have to run from machloikas, let alone be in a machloikas, let alone be in an argument. No, is that hard to do? It's very hard to do. I'm not better at this than anybody else. I'm just giving the shir. But the reality is that it is a mitzvah to stay away from machloikas. On the contrary, it's a mitzvah to make from the two polar opposites of that machloikas shalom. And the more one can do that, and the more that is a pattern of one's consciousness, it's a different kind of life altogether. Okay. So let's talk about this quest to grow without machloikas. You have to know that we learn that there's no bad that comes from Hashem, not even evil. There's no bad that comes from Hashem. So good has its place, evil has its place. Pleasure has its place, pain has its place. Laughter has its place, crying has its place. But one of the saddest things that you'll observe about other people, and not everybody is conscious of this because you don't have the Rebbe to wake you up to it, but once you're waken up to it, you see it. That there are some people that live their lives in a Gevurah lane, and there are some people that live their lives in a Hesed lane, and they don't really come to terms with melding those two, and they suffer because of it. When there's a machloikas between people, of course, because we're human beings, there has to be a system of judgment, arbitration between them. So if somebody harms you, then the Torah provides for methods to redress that harm by damages and all the rest of it. And there are elaborate laws in terms of the judicial process, elaborate laws in terms of witnesses and examination of witnesses and the paying of damages and the enforcing of paying of damages. All of that happens, right? But at the same time, that's the painful path. That's not the best path. I had a father-in-law, Oliver Scholem, who lived to be 97. He never, I can tell you, he never argued with anybody. Never. And I once, before I understood this, there were people that wronged him. There were people that wronged him. Look, he was very fortunate because he was successful and he could afford a bit of loss here and there, and he had no ego, so that didn't matter to him. But I once asked him, how come you don't, you can go to court. I'm cheap, as a lawyer, so. And he'd say, nah, what for? Now, I didn't understand what he was saying, but what he was really saying in his pidgin English was that he didn't need this negative energy. We were once in the casino in Surfers Paradise, and we came in and my mother-in-law used to like to gamble on various things, and he didn't play on any of it. I asked him why he didn't play. He said, you know what? He said, if I win, makes no difference to me. And if I lose, I'll be upset. So what do I need it for? You got to understand this is a perspective. The perspective is that if you have a machloikas with somebody, the assumption is that if you win the argument, you're better off. Who says? Who says you're better off? And the problem is that your brother's worse off. You're fighting with your brother, and if you win, he's worse off. So why is that good? On the other hand, we have to live. We've got disputes, and we have problems. So we have to keep we have to resolve those. But what I'm trying to explain is that the whole point of this number 3 is that rather than winning or losing, resolving the conflict to everybody's satisfaction, that's the main prize. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you do that? So the Rebbe explains very clearly in many of the Igros, many of the letters, he repeats this over and over again. You have to apply to a higher authority. This is a matter of Torah. In other words, if you and your friend are fighting, you go to a person you both respect, and he will help resolve the issue. But that's baby stuff. What we're really talking about is, I've used one of the letters here about golf. I don't know if anybody was here when I used it. I repeated this. There's in one of the Igros, somebody writes into the Rebbe and he says that he grew up on a golf course. I've told you this, huh? He grew up on a golf course, huh?
He wants to play Shabbos.
And he wanted to, not Shabbos, he wanted to play Sunday. He became a Baal Tshuva. He married a religious girl. They had the requisite number of children straight away, one after the other. And he worked very hard all week, kept Shabbos on Shabbos. They lived in Crown Heights, so what did he do Shabbos? He went to the Fabringen. The Rebbe Fabring from 1 o'clock till Mincha, Ma'ariv, and she never saw him. That was her complaint. She said that I don't have anything of you. On Sunday he went to golf, and he played golf all Sunday. So she said, during the week you work, Shabbos you're there, and Sunday you play golf. And he writes into the Rebbe and he says, that's her case. and I understand, but my case is that I grew up playing golf. I played golf off one handicap or two, a scratch golfer. He said, I love golf. It was my whole life. It is part of my... And if I knew I had to give up golf when I married my wife, I wouldn't have married her. So who's right? Who's right? Right? So the Rebbe replied, if you remember, the Rebbe replied, there isn't a question of who's right, because with her givens, she's right, and with your givens, you're right. You have to ask, you have to submit it to a higher authority. What's the higher authority?
She should become the Qadi.
That is good.
What's the higher authority? The question that you have to ask, says the Rebbe, what is good, the best for the marriage? Not for the golf or the you being at home on Sunday. What is the best for the marriage? When you ask yourself that question, then the conflict resolves itself. You know.
So what was the answer?
Huh?
What was the answer?
What was the answer?
What did they do?
The Rebbe doesn't give you the answer. The Rebbe gives them that answer. I don't know what they did. Hopefully they understood that they had to do what was best for the marriage. So I'm trying to explain that when there is a conflict, the game is to refer it to a higher authority. Now that higher authority, if it's a simple dispute, you go to an arbitrator. But if it's an emotional thing, you have to be able to take that emotion to its higher... Let me give you another example. I've had some experience with this lately from afar, with not my family, thank God, other family, where two kids are getting married, and both parents can't afford one of these searchlights and elephants weddings with. So it's a struggle for both of them to do this, and they agree to share in the cost half and half. So far, shalom, right? Then they sit down and make the plans for the wedding, and she is a bitch and he is a bully, and this one's it, and she wants that the chuppah be outside, and the other mother doesn't want it outside because it's cold, and the grandparents are coming, and the grandparents suffer in the cold. And what if it rains? And if because it's in winter, it's a June wedding, and then what about the clothes? She wants bridesmaids, and that means 6 bridesmaids' dresses, and she wants grooms to be in same colour suits with the same colour ties, and they've got to then spend the money, and who are they spending? And they're fighting, and every day that they're planning the wedding, the fighting gets worse, right? So there's a letter from the Rebbe on almost the same thing. The examples are a little bit different, but it was a wedding, and there was a machloikas between them and on various issues, on the kind of mechitza that they'd have, whether there was going to be mixed dancing or not mixed dancing, and these are halakhic issues, so there should be no argument on it. And they write into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says the question's wrong. It's not about the wedding. You have to ask the question: what's better for their marriage? What's better for their marriage? What's better for you and your new mukatonim relationship for the rest of your lives in your marriage? That's the important issue. You understand this? That you're taking the two ingredients of machloikas and subjecting it to a bird's eye view, a higher view of what is a resolution of that problem. And that resolution of that problem comes from referring it to a higher authority. And that's what Torah is for a Jew. A Jew is going to have all the same problems as everybody else, all the same problems as a non-Jew, But we are entrusted to avoid machloikas because it's the I'm going to have to explain that. Before Shavuos, before Matan Torah, you all know that Matan Torah was probably, together with the Mabul, with the flood, and the coming of Mashiach, probably one of the three most important moments in history. Why was it so important in history? Because prior to Hashem coming down onto Har Sinai and Am Yisrael going up on Har Sinai, and I'll come to that if we get time in a minute, because that's a dynamic in itself. But before that, the heavens were the heavens and the earth was the earth. In other words, physicality was physicality and spirituality was spirituality. And the two didn't mix. And you couldn't make out of something physical something spiritual. And you couldn't take something spiritual and make it physical. It was impossible. Comes Matan Torah, and Hashem appoints this little army of Jews to have a responsibility of combining spirituality and physicality together. What does that mean, combining physicality and spirituality together? It means taking two extremes and making and submitting it to a higher authority. Who's the higher authority? Hashem. And how do you submit it to the higher authority? You learn his Torah and you do his mitzvahs. And then everything else disappears. Everything else becomes secondary. Everything else becomes trivial in comparison. And your life, and this is the amazing thing that's so difficult to get across to somebody who, I mean, you guys are different. You've been listening to this stuff for, some of you, for many years. So it's easier for you. But you understand that for a beginner, it's very difficult to understand this, that his life is actually going to be super enriched by understanding that all his warring conflicts need to be submitted to a higher authority. What's that higher authority? To Hashem's Torah and mitzvahs. And a Jew who lives his life in terms of Torah and mitzvahs with a consciousness of living his life in terms of Torah and mitzvahs is submitting these two extremes to the middle extreme, to the middle point, which is shalom. And conflict is great. We have to have evil because otherwise you don't have tshuva. We have to have good because otherwise chesed has no purpose. But ultimately you have to be able to bring them together and make them function as a workable, productive force. And that is Kedusha. That's Kedusha for a Jew. Now, what is it, what is it about this Torah and mitzvahs that enables shalom to be made? What's the dynamic of that? So the Rebbe explains this. The key to understanding this is to understand that our lives are purposeful. Everything in creation is purposeful. There's no such thing as a leaf that was created for nothing, a caterpillar that was created for nothing, an elephant that was created for nothing. Everything in the world is consciously created by Hashem and purposeful. We don't see the purpose in some things. Give it time. Our purpose is to tune into that purposefulness of creation. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have You have an argument between evolutionists and people that believe in God, right? So, and let's give everybody the credit. They're intelligent, they're sincere, they all want good. Nobody's being an evil person here. So, if you really believe in evolution as its own exclusive energy without any God and any system of purpose other than the evolution according to what's most beneficial for the species. So you can't object to any lack of morality. You can't expect people to be good or bad or not to steal unless you invent a moral system which is not a moral system, but it's a way that you can socially get on with each other best. But there's no purpose to life. Why were you born? Why are you dying? What are you achieving in the intermediate 100 years, 120 years? There can't be any purpose because it's random. It's random selection, and you want to close that? You can't. So at the end of the day, when this man is genuinely believing in his point of view, he's living a very lonely, bereft life. On the other hand, if you really believe in Hashem, with all that entails, that he is creating everything every moment and recreating it everything, you see that there's a purpose in creation. There has to be. Otherwise, God is, God forbid, an idiot. So, I mean, why would you create something that was purposeless? So if you understand that there's a purpose, there is a need to tune into that purpose. That need to turn into that purpose converts your everyday life, depending on how often you tune into it. What Shavuos does is takes a Jew and gives him a life purpose. What's the life purpose? We learn this over and over, to make a dira b'taktoinim. What does it mean to make a dira b'taktoinim? We have to take the spiritual and bring it down into the physical, and we have to take the physical and elevate it to the spiritual. How do we know? Because on Matan Torah, Hashem came down and Am Yisrael went up to this little mountain. And that's all symbolism for this dynamic, that there is a necessity for a Jew. That's our job. That's the mission we were given on Har Sinai. The mission that we're given on Har Sinai is to live generation after generation. By the way, you should know, there are very few generations. You know, people think there's 1,000 years is 30 generations, 32, 33 generations. So it's really not so long. And what has to be done in that period of time is that we have been given the mission of bringing Ruchnius into Gashmius and Gashmius elevating it to Ruchnius. Are we doing a good job? We're doing a good job, no question. The Goyim, and I don't mean that phrase, that word critically, I mean the Gentiles is the word I'm looking for. Gentiles don't have our job. Gentiles have the job of building Gashmias, of doing all the things, beautiful opera and music and architecture and all the wonderful piece and technology and computers and artificial intelligence and they're doing a marvelous job. And our job is to introduce into that Ruchnius. And we've been doing that marvelously. How do you know? Because, you know, the biggest Baal Tzedakahs in the world at the moment are Gentiles. Do you know that? This used to be a patent. You know, the Christians have a thing I went to a Christian school in Nebach. I know a lot of New Testament. They have a saying, neither a borrower nor a lender be. You know, that's part of their religion. You know, we have a mitzvah to lend money to the poor. You're telling me you may not get it back? So what? You don't control that. I don't control that. That's a matter of Ashkoka Brothers. We have a mitzvah. If somebody comes to you and they are asking for money, you have to give him. You're suspicious that he doesn't need it, you give him less. But you can't say no. We cannot say no. If he's come 15 times and you suspect him of fraud, you give him 10 cents. But you can't say no. So we have been, we were the torch bearers of tzedakah. We are the ones that started Gemilas Chasodim. We are the ones who started hospitals for the sick, that people should help the sick, help the poor. Today, I can tell you that there are people who are putting us to shame with the tzedakah they give. Some of the billionaires who are giving unbelievable amounts of money. So we've taught them. And the Dira B'Taktoinim, you should know, is not the simple privilege of Jews. And we have to be the funnel through which the job goes to the rest of humanity. We have to be a light to the nations. In other words, we have to keep morality and show that we keep that morality, and that morality is Torah and mitzvahs. Gentiles don't have all of our mitzvahs, but we bring Kedusha to the world by keeping Torah and mitzvahs. But at the end of the day, what is that? It is again submitting your life, my life, to a higher purpose. What's the higher purpose? To Hashem, by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And when you understand that dynamic, then you have a different kind of life. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay. This concept of Dira B'Taktoinim, let's understand what that is. That is ultimately the same paradigm that we've been talking about. Why? Because one extreme is heaven, Ruchnius, and one extreme is earth, Gashmius. And to make a Dira B'Taktoinim means to make a dwelling place for Hashem in physicality. What does that mean? It means that there'll be a Gilui Elokus, there'll be a revelation of godliness in nature, which at the moment is impossible. Why? Because the whole business of physicality is that Hashem is hidden and not available to be seen. Why? Because if he was, the whole world would burn up in the blaze of revealed godliness. So we learn that nature, Hateva, which is the same gematria as nature, that it is same gematria as Shem Elokim, is a curtain against seeing and experiencing godliness. You see the effects of godliness, but you don't see godliness. In the same way as you know you have a neshama, but you know nothing about your neshama. You don't see it, you don't feel it, you can't identify it, you don't understand any of its properties. You do see the result of it. You see that a person's alive and that he can move his fingers and toes. That life force we know is the neshama. And when the neshama is separated from the guf's dead. But the future, the whole purpose of existence is that sooner or later, Mashiach will be revealed. What does that mean, that Mashiach will be revealed? It will mean that there will be made a dir v'taktonim, that God will reveal himself in nature, which is incomprehensible to us at the moment. But you have to understand that basically it's the same paradigm. It's physicality and spirituality, and at the end there'll be a shalom between the two of them and a dir v'taktonim. And this is a pattern. It's not a. This is an absolute hardwired reality, spiritual reality. And the sooner a Jew understands that reality, the sooner he can start applying it to himself, and to understand that when he has conflicts, when he has conflicting ideas, when he has conflicting emotions, the first job is not to determine which is right. It's not important which is right. You've got them both. What you've got to do is to make shalom between them. How do you make shalom between them? You go to a higher authority, and when you go to that higher authority and you make shalom between them, your life's a different life. And that's what we are celebrating Shavuos. That the ability to do that, the instruction to do that, the undertaking of that dynamic for oneself, and ultimately the success of that. And that's what we celebrate with Shavuos. And that's why Shavuos is arguably the most important of the Yom Tovim, because at the end of the day, it's the hardwired pattern that makes a difference between living and existing, living purposefully, happily, or existing and just dealing with every problem as it comes along. We don't deal with the problem as it comes along. We treat what happens as it comes along as Ashkoka Protis. We try and work with what is happening to us. We try and work with the negative and the positive and refer it to a higher authority and understand that we needed that. And now that we've had it, we deal with that test, we move on to the next one. It's a different life. So everybody should try and remember that on Sunday night.
Sure.
L'chaim.
Fine.
It's my birthday on the second day.
That's
So
nice.
everyone have a l'chaim.